Welcome back, folks. I hope you're having a good start to your week. I really hadn't planned to do this one this early, but a video I released yesterday was taken down very quickly for a strike because of medical misinformation. Now, I'm not going to go into what it was because they'll strike this one too, but we have a lot going on right now that is either going to cause this country to utterly collapse into a hellhole that we will think is so far worse than the USSR or Cuba was or Venezuela is that it will be unfathomable, or it will backfire horrifically on those involved. I'm Sheepdog Smokey. I want to thank you for coming and dropping by. Before we go on, make sure that you're subscribed, notifications on so you know of all videos like this. Make sure to share and like the video and comment so that we can have the conversation and we can actually maybe learn something from each other. There's something that I've kind of wanted to talk about for a little while. In some countries it's official, in other countries it's whispered about, in other countries it's not even whispered about because the control is so total in those countries that people won't even dare be caught thinking this. What it is a shadow government. Now, there are two schools of thought on what a shadow government is. The first one is that it is a secondary tier of the cabinet. And this is brought up in literature mostly that I've seen, and pretty much always in reference to the United Kingdom, where you have a shadow prime minister and a shadow cabinet. And this is basically to take over in the case of a catastrophe. The U.S. does not have this because we have a line of succession, president to vice president to Speaker of the House, through the cabinet, and so on. And these people are rarely together, okay? They almost never gather in one place, all of them. In fact, just a few years ago, there was a television show called Designated Survivor. And the premise of that was that for the State of the Union, one member of the presidential line of succession would not go. They would be in a location that no one but their security detail and they knew about, and they didn't even know where it was, in case the worst happened. And in this TV show it did, and Kiefer Sutherland's character became the President of the United States. Now, as we go through the show, and spoilers ahead in case you haven't watched it, I watched first season and a half, 2 seasons. But basically, as we go through the show, we find out someone else was in a bunker and they challenged for the role of president and so on. But that's why the U.S. does not have a shadow cabinet or a shadow government to step in case the worst happens. We handle it by saying we're not going to put ourselves in a situation where the entire government, the entire line of succession can be wiped out, leaving us with nothing. Basically, we won't be in a situation where all of Congress and everybody is gone, leaving 535 elections to happen, a vice president and president to be elected, Supreme Court to be filled, and so on. We're just not going to allow that situation to happen. Someone will be in the line of succession and able to step into that and continue the government. If you look at things like the NRA convention, where President Trump and Vice President Pence both spoke, that's exceedingly rare, to the point of I don't remember it happening outside of Inauguration Day. And if you want to see what tight security looks like, you look at Washington, D.C. on Inauguration Day. If you look back at, say, 22 November 1963, Johnson was in Texas, but was nowhere near Dealey Plaza. They didn't want Kennedy and Johnson in the same place. You look back at I believe it was 82 or 3, when Hinckley took a shot at Reagan. Quayle was nowhere, or not Quayle, Bush was nowhere near him. That way, the line of succession, president to vice president, there couldn't be one person that got them. And, I mean, you look at something like, say, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. They're accounting for unaccountability. They're accounting for sheer happenstance. World War I, the powder keg was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And it happened because his driver took a wrong turn, and the secondary guy just happened to see him and take the shot. The president and vice president are kept in separate locations. They live in separate locations. They fly on different planes and different choppers for that reason. And it's exceedingly rare to have more than one or two together, save things like Inauguration Day or the State of the Union and so on. I was at the NRA convention in 2017. Happened in May. It was President Trump and Vice President Pence's first visit as President and Vice President to the NRA convention. And I can tell you that traffic was hell in Dallas for a good little while when they left, because Vice President Pence spoke first, and then before President Trump was announced to speak, he was already being taken out to his plane to leave. They were not there together for any longer than had to be. Secret Service was everywhere. When President Trump left, he went a different route to his plane, to Air Force One, to go on his way. I went to a Trump rally in 2018 in Dallas at Reunion Arena, or American Airlines Center, showing my age there, and we took the train. And when we left a little bit early so that we could make sure we caught the train that we needed to so we could get back and make sure we got to work the next day and so on. That train sat there at Victory Station for well over an hour because they locked down entire streets to make sure President Trump got back to Air Force One. And they didn't unlock them until he was so far clear of the AAC that they felt safe unlocking them. The train could not move. That's how seriously the U.S. government takes protection of government officials at many, many levels. And that is why we don't need a shadow government, a shadow cabinet. But there's the second school of thought on what a shadow government or a shadow cabinet is. And it is an opposition force, an opposition group working against the current administration. As I said, with President Trump and Vice President Pence speaking at the NRA convention in 2017, I'm 43 years old. I have been a history lover since high school. I have followed history and politics since high school and some in middle school. And, I mean, I grew up where I would get home from school and, yeah, I might watch a little bit of television, but either right after dinner or during dinner, depending on when we ate, the news would be on. My parents watched the news every night. And we would hear, we heard about when John Hinckley stupidly did what he did with Reagan. We heard about Reagan's joke to the nurse, "I don't like that take, let's do it again." We heard about everything. And I vaguely remember all of it, but I cannot remember a time prior to the NRA convention, save government functions, where the president and vice president were both at the same event. It was unprecedented, okay? But there's another unprecedented event. Barack Hussein Obama is the first United States president who, after leaving office, did not leave Washington, D.C. He claims Hawaii as his birth state, home state, and he was living in Chicago prior to becoming a senator for Illinois. In 2008, he resigned his Senate seat because he had won the election, and then from 2009 to 17 lived in D.C. in the White House. January of 2017, he moved into another home in Washington, D.C. Reports were that he had a war room in his home. And a war room is simply a term for a central planning location. My office has a war room, and most often it is the upper management, or in some cases programmers as well. When we have something big that has happened or we're planning, that room gets used a lot because it has what they need to either run a projector so they can show programming, or it has a whiteboard to diagram things, has a conference table so they can have conferences. Businesses and government offices the world over have war rooms. Why does a private home? And I want to stress that I have zero proof of any of this, but I have heard a lot of stories about this. It's well known that Barack Obama bought a home in Washington, D.C. So it's well known that it is fact that he is the first U.S. president who, after leaving office, did not leave Washington, D.C. That in itself raises a lot of questions. But after watching what we have for the last month with Democrats the country over, all but screaming into cameras, how dare you even suggest a recount? How dare you suggest that we shouldn't just mail out ballots to everyone? How dare you suggest that this election is not 100% perfect in all respects? You see, in 2000, when the election didn't go Al Gore's way, he sued for 37 days. We still have 10 more days to reach that point in this election. I remember that election. I remember it well. I actually worked for the Republican Party in my county during that election. I did so again, just going out to East Texas to stump for Louis Gohmert, because my congresswoman was not up for re-election in 2004. Why did pretty much everybody but Fox News call Florida an hour before polling places in Central Time Zone closed? Florida does have a split in the Panhandle. It's not huge, but it does exist. It's well known because people have said, we heard the state was called, we turned around and went home. We didn't go vote. How wide would the margin for George W. Bush have been in 2000 had they not called that state before all polling places were closed? Yet Al Gore sued for more than a month over dangling chads. 2016, Hillary Clinton. While, yes, she may have officially given a concession speech, to this day, she maintains that she actually won. Stacey Abrams is doing the same, maintaining that she's the real governor of Georgia, but she was denied her seat because of racism, or whatever else she's saying, because of 2018. Why is it when Democrats don't like the results of an election, they are expected to be able to sue for as long as they need? But when it's Democrats who magically find hundreds of thousands of votes between 3 and 4 in the morning, while counting is supposedly stopped, why are we just required to say, oh, well, they said it's fine, so we have to believe them? And the simple answer is they've been doing this for decades, and they firmly believe it's their right to do whatever they want. To the point where now they supposedly have an actual shadow government working against the government. But why D.C.? Now, this is something I have found very little information on, and trust me, I have been digging for this. There's the old joke that the University of Oklahoma dug down 100 feet and found copper wire and said, we had power 100 years ago. University of Texas dug 500 feet, found copper deposits, said, we had electricity 500 years ago. Texas A&M dug down 1,000 feet and found nothing, said, we had wireless power transmission 1,000 years ago. I've dug deeper than all of that if I'd actually been physically digging. I've been trying to find anything I can on the Constitution of 1871. What I have found basically says that a new Constitution was adopted in 1871, basically setting Washington, D.C. completely separate from the United States, and it, along with London and Rome, basically are part of a global tri-city or tri-state, whatever you want to call it, scenario where within D.C. the rule of law of the U.S. does not apply, and the U.S. is no longer a government of the people, for the people, and by the people, but run as a business because in 1871 we needed to borrow money from the Rothschilds or the Vatican or both. And that would answer the question of why set up a shadow government in Washington, D.C. And that is basically saying because they feel immune to our laws in Washington, D.C. It is worrying And it is frightening to think that in this country that my ancestors fought, bled, and died for in 1776, 1812, for the Union in the Civil War, during World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and since, and some still serve, that this could happen. Nations generally last 1,000 years or more. The Roman Empire spanned almost 1,000 years before even the inkling of collapse happened. And it was because of their own stupidity training slaves to be amazing fighters. The British Empire spanned the globe for centuries before its territories began to realize they could govern themselves. The U.S. is 244 years old. We're an adolescent compared to countries throughout history, save really only Israel, which, when you add up everything, is more than 244 years, but only 70 some odd, 72 at this point, since the UN re-established the nation of Israel in 1948 after World War II. The simple answer is that there are people, and there always have been, who believe that it is their right to rule. In some countries, that is rewarded with a monarchy. The House of Windsor, at this point, although it's had other names throughout history, is the royal family, even if they have very little power, if any, today. But in the U.S., that would be the Democrat Party. You only have to listen to them to hear it. 2012, we have to pass the bill to find out what's in it. That anyone in Congress could actually say that boggles the mind. Today, despite hearing them cry on television or on the radio or seeing their tearful statements in print, that the American people are suffering and they need relief now. It's the Democrats blocking Republican bills that would do that very thing in the Senate. The only one I actually think might not understand that is AOC, because she doesn't understand anything. Ocasio-Cortez believes that her vaunted education from New York about economics taught her that socialism, taking from the workers and earners and giving to everyone else who doesn't earn, is good. But the rest of them have to be able to see that they are the ones voting no on relief bills. Pelosi refuses to negotiate or even discuss any form of compromise. President Trump point blank said, pass a bill that does nothing but send a relief check to the American people and I will sign it. Pelosi could have had a moment to crow to the world that she led the charge to pass that bill. Her sycophants would have been all but crowning her queen of the universe for being so compassionate and so understanding of the plight of the American people that she introduced and passed the bill and got the Senate to pass it and got Trump to sign it. But no, she insists that only her pork-laden bills that send money to people like happened the first time, the Kennedy Performing Center, which instantly put everyone to unemployment, laid off everyone, and funneled money back to the DNC. So they give money to an organization that instantly lays everyone off so they no longer need the money for payroll, and they funnel money right back to the DNC. They're trying to bypass amendments that have been passed years ago to use federal money to fund Planned Parenthood, which is right now illegal. They're not trying to undo the amendment. They're not trying to say, remove this amendment so we can do this. They're trying to say, just let us do it no matter what. And they feel empowered because they feel that they are controlling everything from elections all the way down. I don't know a single person who firmly believes that 100,000 ballots showed up, 100% of them for the same candidate. Either way, if they had showed up for Trump, I'd be saying the same thing. Those are fraudulent ballots. I don't know a single person who believes more than maybe 0.1% nationwide would vote for president only and leave every other election or race on the ballot unmarked. I know a lot of people who voted the down ballot races only because they didn't want Trump or Biden. I know several people who did that. They still voted for their congressman, they still voted for their senator, they still voted for their state races, their local races, still did all those, they just left the president spot blank. I disagree with both of those because it allows for unscrupulous people in the counting process to say, oh, they didn't vote, so I'll just fill this in. We have video of people trying to complete or whatever you want to call it, ballots that didn't have a signature or didn't have a race filled in or whatever, and whatever else they want to come up with. There are two simple solutions that, quite honestly, I don't see why anyone would oppose them. The first one is to completely get rid of any electronic ballots. Paper ballots only, with the addition of a field for I abstain. That way, if you don't want to vote in a race, say you don't want to vote for the president and vice president, but you want to vote for the rest, there's an I abstain box that you can say, I'm not voting for the presidency, or I'm not voting for Congress, or I'm not voting on this issue about a bond. Paper ballots only, with voter ID enforced in all 50 states. In addition to that, we need a constitutional amendment requiring that the census ask the question of if someone is a citizen. Not if you're here legally or not, just are you a citizen? There are a lot of people who live and work in this country, raise families in this country, who never gain citizenship. Look at Tom Hiddleston. Look at Chris Hemsworth. Look at Sir Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen. Any of those people who come to Hollywood to make movies. Look at the Americans who go all over the world making movies, and they live there for months and months on end. And they have to have a green card to live and work in that country. Just as anyone living and working in this country who's not a citizen needs the same. So I'm not saying jackbooted thugs, are you here legally? Dragging people out. No. The census form simply says, what is your citizenship? U.S., other. Don't ask about green card, don't ask about legal status, nothing of the sort. And we need it because the 26th Amendment states that citizens of the United States aged 18 years or older are the only people allowed to vote in American elections. It doesn't say that, well, if it's a city election, you can let people vote under 18. No. United States citizens aged 18 years or older are the only people who may vote. I mean, this is the one that's rather ironic. It was passed in 1972, I believe. I know it was passed because my parents would have been able to vote, or it was the first time they could vote, and it was passed lowering the age to vote. Okay, I had to look. I have constitutions. I have several hundred sitting over there. Amendment 26, Section 1. The right of citizens of the United States who are 18 years of age or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of age. Section 2. The Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. The 26th Amendment was ratified July 1st, 1971. That was the year my parents turned 21. Just before they turned 21, they're later in the year. But basically saying the next election would be your first. It's still going to be your first, even though now you would have been able to vote. Just a little bit of what I think is humorous. But because the 26th Amendment to the United States Constitution says the right of citizens of the United States who are 18 years of age or older to vote cannot be denied on account of age, that means non-citizens and those under 18 may not vote. It's that simple. The Constitution says it. Now, for those of you who are watching, if you are, that don't agree with it, for those in Congress who don't agree with it, there is a process to amend this document. There are actually two. One, Congress, both houses, individually, may pass an amendment by a 2/3 vote, not a simple majority. 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate must vote to pass an amendment. It is then passed to the states, where 3/4 of the states must ratify said vote. Meaning that it's never going to happen, because that many people in the House and in the Senate are never going to vote for that amendment, and 38 states won't ratify it. Option 2 is an Article 5 Convention of States, where 2/3 of the states, or 34, call for an Article 5 convention. Those states then select delegates who then travel to the convention. They debate and vote on amendments to the Constitution. 2/3 of the delegates must vote to pass an amendment. It is then sent to the 50 state legislatures, where 3/4, or 38, must ratify. Until the 38th state, or beyond, has ratified said amendment, it is not an amendment to the Constitution. But you see, there are people who realize neither of those are going to happen, so they just say, screw it, I'm going to do what I want anyway. They form shadow governments to where they can talk to other people and say, no, don't pass this bill. That way when the election comes, we can say Trump wouldn't have signed it anyway, or we can blame the Republicans for blocking it even though we never let it happen to a vote. Or they can tell world leaders, just wait, 4 years, we'll get rid of all the people that we want to get rid of, and we'll be back in power, and then you can do this, and we'll all look good. In my mind, very simply, it's treasonous, because they are actively working against the interests of the United States. I don't understand why this is not a majority mindset, that anyone working against the interests of the United States, such as John Brennan, openly giving aid and comfort to our enemies in Iran because a terrorist leader, whether he was an official of the government or not, a terrorist leader or sponsor was killed. When Soleimani was killed, we know he was the architect of many deaths of Americans. But the Democrats went nuts that we should have not done that. I'm honestly surprised that the Democrats didn't say we should have left Saddam Hussein in power and left Osama bin Laden alive. I mean, it's really only the fact that the world watched 9/11, and the world knows that Saddam Hussein was just aching to make it happen again, that maybe they realized, okay, these two we shouldn't complain about. But then, as time went on and memories began to fade, and their own ramblings about how the American way of life is horribly racist, and as they got people into office who could say that they moved here to create a better country, not to come to a better country, and as the education system produced people with no idea that the only thing socialism has ever or will ever do is kill millions, so they worked in shadow. Sadly, they've been doing it long enough that they've amassed a massive power base. I can only hope that some of the things I've seen, that I'm not going to name here because YouTube will say, oh, those are conspiracy theories. I can only hope some of what I've been seeing is true. Because there are a lot of people who have betrayed this country and betrayed the sacrifice of everyone who has fought, bled, and died for it. My thoughts, as I said at the beginning, sadly I have no actual proof of this, because if it is true, those doing it have been very, very successful at covering their tracks. Doesn't mean I'm not going to stop. Doesn't mean I'm not going to dig. Doesn't mean I'll stop looking for that proof. Just means it's going to be devilish to find. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. As always, be civil. We're not here to scream and yell like toddlers. We're here to discuss, dissent, and debate like civil adults, so please do so. Again, also make sure that you like and share the video to widen the conversation, and that you're subscribed with notifications on, so videos like this you're aware of as they post. At least as long as YouTube doesn't take them down. Until next time, have a wonderful day.